author David McKnight, author of the book, The Power of Zero. And Dave, for our listeners who don't know about you, don't know about your work from The Power of Zero, describe your background.
Yeah, thanks, Josh, for having me on again. Wrote The Power of Zero back in 2013. At that time, I think a lot of Americans were putting the lion's share of their retirement savings into 401ks and IRAs, pre-tax dollars, sort of making the bet that tax rates in the future would be much lower than they are today, and be able to wring the most out of the retirement savings. I wrote that book because I was looking at the national trajectory of the fiscal situation in our country, unfunded obligations for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. I said, there is no way the tax rates, even 20 years from now, are going to be lower than they are today. And so I wrote that book to try to raise awareness that if we really are in a rising tax rate environment, then we should really change the way we approach our retirement savings. We should be investing in tax-free vehicles, taking advantage of historically low tax rates so that by the time tax rates do eventually rise over time, we've done all the heavy lifting and then take those dollars out tax-free. So I wrote The Power of Zero in 2013, threw it out on Amazon, sort of crossed my fingers and hope for the best. And here we are about 10 years later. It's sold about 450,000 copies. It got picked up by Penguin Random House and spawned a couple of sequels. And so it's been a great ride, and it's been a lot of fun raising awareness with Americans across the country.
What's your latest project? I know you're now a thriller writer with the Infinity Code. And what are you working on lately?
I'm trying to persuade my publisher or at least my agent, to find a publisher who will allow me to write a book that's critical of financial gurus like Dave Ramsey, Suze Orman, Clark Howard, Ken Fisher. I think that a lot of what those people write about is formulaic. It's one size fits all. It's sort of black and white. I think it fits a sector of America who tends to spend more than what they take in. They're making 50, but they're spending 60. Dave Ramsey's the guy for you. But I think they try to package your material so that it applies to all Americans, and I think that's a dangerous approach. And so I tend to, the goal is to try to expose what I call the gap between what the financial advice that they provide and the type of advice that people that have substantial wealth actually need. And the one size fits all approach does not apply to people who have substantial wealth and are trying to wring the most out of their retirement savings. So that's the book that I plan on writing at some point in the next year.
Wonderful. And I want to get into your concept called LIRP, how to buy the right insurance policy, all of those things. That's another big book. Is it Look Before You LIRP? I forget the exact title.
Look Before You LIRP. That's right.
And then how many children do you have? 7?
I can't
seven?
remember if I'm one ahead of you or not. I got 7.
There was a time where you were one ahead of me, and I caught up 2 years ago. So great. So we are both financial people with 7 kids. That should be a podcast.
That
would be fun because I think we did the most offensive things that people tell you with 7 kids. And you know what's amazing? Having 7 kids, people go, "How do you do it?" It's just a blessing. I mean, the kids are the easiest. When you have 7 kids, you miss time with your wife. There are things that you miss, but the kids that people think are the biggest problem are actually the greatest joy. They're just such a joy to have that. And we play baseball in the backyard. We play soccer in the backyard. They're never without a playmate. It's the most fun thing. I came from a family of 4, which is great. 3 brothers and sisters. But 7, it just hits different. It's way more fun. It's like exponential fun because if one kid isn't getting along with another kid, they just play with another kid. It's a fun, and then they'll switch who they hang out with almost on a daily basis. And you see little sweet moments with my 14-year-old daughter and my 3-year-old boy. And just fun things. So what is the greatest thing about having 7 kids? for you, or top three?
Let's see. The greatest thing about having 7 kids, I don't know. I just love having, it's, to me, having a family and having children is like my main purpose in life. And so it's sort of like saying, what's so great about having this really rewarding purpose in life? And I don't know. It's just like, if I didn't have the children, I mean, eventually I'll move to this chapter of my life where the children are out of the nest. I've already got 2 that are out of the nest. But it's just so interwoven with what my central purpose in life is that it's just what brings me happiness. And I love them all. I remember before you said, people say, "Hey, you've got your hands full," and you say, "Yeah, your hands full of blessings." On a more practical level, Josh, I will tell you this: when people say, "Hey, man, that's a lot of kids, too many," I love to point out, who do you think is going to pay for your Social Security? Because Social Security is underfunded, and to be able to pay for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, we need more children. It's this demographic time bomb in our country that's bearing down on us, that's going to create huge fiscal issues for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So our country literally needs more children. So it's not just about the reward of having children, it's about the fiscal constraints that are bearing down on our country because we're not having enough children.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a dearth. Talk about the demographic cliff that our country's falling off. But it's just fun that we both have 7 kids. It's a fun little tidbit. And, we could do a podcast probably, or YouTube, the things that large families get told that are the most offensive things. It's like, are they all yours? No, they're the mailman's. My wife, I got in trouble for saying, my wife does not like when I say that. She has banned me to say that. But like, what do they expect? It's like, it's.
We were over in Dubai, and Dubai is a Muslim country, and when we would tell, for example, our tour guide that we had 7 children, he says, "Yeah, but among how many different mothers?" And my wife would say, "Well, I was the only mother." And they would look at her with this shock look on their face. They couldn't believe it. They hardly ever see that. And they would always say this phrase, I think I'm getting it right, Mashallah, which means God be with you, God prosper you, something like that. And they were just so effusive in their praise because over there, they just love children. They just really, really love children. And my wife, usually, when my wife comes to me to events and things like that, people treat me like the rock star. When she was with me throughout that entire trip and they found out that she had 7 kids, she was the rock star. So it was fun to see her get lavish with praise because of her 7 children.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So let's talk about the demographic cliff. What are we really experiencing? Because I remember when you first came on the scene, you were talking about the Peter G. Peterson Foundation and all these kind of things. And we hear in the news, I think Ron DeSantis is the first candidate I've heard in a while talk about the debt as a problem. He just announced for the presidency a week or 2 ago. And he's hitting hard Trump. He's hitting Trump hard now. I don't want to get political here because of financial show, but hitting Trump hard on the deficit. So it was a little refreshing to hear somebody talk about the national debt. But we've lived, I guess we would say, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, not to pick on anyone's favorite political candidates, where I remember, Clinton and Gingrich talked about the debt, and then it seemed like there was a 20-year vacuum where the debt didn't matter, but it does matter. So let's talk about the debt and the demographic cliff our nation's facing. I guess they're 2 distinct things. Both are problematic.
So let's go. I actually did a podcast recently on this. Let's go backward in time to Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton left office, he left the office with $5 trillion, and he stood before the nation right before he left. And he said, "I got great news." We said, "We have budget surpluses for the next 20 years. In other words, if all we do is we stick to the budget, we will have budget surpluses for the next 20 years. Okay. And what happened between then and now is we added on $26 trillion of debt. And we did that for a variety of reasons. We did that because of the prescription drug program. That was like $8 trillion of unfunded obligations. We financed a couple of wars. We normally raise taxes to be able to do that. We had the COVID crisis. So all of these things added up, okay, to the point where we're now at $31 trillion. So that's what drove the debt up until now. But what's going to be driving the debt between now and, say, 2033? Biden has projected that the debt will grow by $20 trillion between now and then. What is going to be growing the debt between now and then, at a rate of $2 trillion per year? It's going to be underfunding for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. In other words, we have promised way more than we can afford to pay for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Why is that? Well, it's because baby boomers had much fewer children than their parents did. Okay, so there are about 78 million baby boomers, and they're the next generation, Generation X. I'm a Generation Xer. There's about 30 million fewer of us. Okay, so you now have much fewer people putting into the kitty than much more people taking out. And as baby boomers leave the workforce, they're going to stop putting money into the program. They're going to start taking money out. And as they do, we're going to approach this day of reckoning for our country. We know that, for example, Social Security Trust Fund runs completely dry in 2032 or so, which means that it's going to have to get by on simply the revenue coming in. There's no longer going to be that rainy day fund, which is money that had built up over the years that was surplus that didn't need to go out. It was just building up over time. That's going to be completely exhausted by 2032. Medicare is going to go bust a lot sooner than that. So we have these demographic issues that are that are driving these fiscal issues. And Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are so expensive that they are going to bankrupt our country unless we either dramatically raise taxes, dramatically modify those programs, reduce them somehow, or some combination of two. So that's really what's facing our country. And the message that I've been trying to get out is that I don't believe the federal government is going to be taking away Medicare, Social Security, or Medicaid. I think they're going to be raising huge amounts of revenue. They're going to need huge infusions of cash. At some point in the next 10 years, they're going to kick the can down the road, as we can see by these recent debt ceiling negotiations. They love to kick the can down the road. They're going to kick the can down the road, which means the fix on the back end is going to be even more severe, even more draconian, and tax rates are going to have to go up. And I'm not the only one that's saying this anymore. It's most experts do believe that tax rates, even 10 years from now, have to rise dramatically, or we go bust as a country. So the question becomes, if you are saving for retirement, should all of this information change your approach?
So I also think that a problem is spending. I mean, you talk about that, but I read something the other day. I don't know if you've done any research on this, but COVID spending, why are we still spending like it's COVID? If we just change our budget to, let's say, 2019, that would help us get on a path to greater fiscal responsibility. But nobody's doing that. Have you researched that? Like what the budget was in 2019?
No, but if history serves as a model, we know that once the government earmarks money for a program, it tends to be put in place permanently. And I think that's the fear with a lot of these programs where, they have expiration dates or whatever. Once America becomes habituated to a program, they tend to get really angry when that program gets taken away. That's why I personally believe that the Trump tax cuts will be extended for the middle class prior to 2026 and extended for another 8 years. So that doesn't surprise me if that's the case.
Yeah, I believe DeSantis brought it up that, hey, one way to get a control of the debt, he was kind of critiquing the McCarthy Biden budget deal, like, hey guys, this isn't a real deal for the Republicans or those on the right or people, just Americans who want more fiscal restraint. The real thing is we got to go back to the pre-COVID budget because we don't have those spendings. And I think this budget deal is a sham. When will our nation live within its means? But I don't want to get, too political, but you talk about the problem. Our country is spending money like a drunken sailor on the left and the right. They're just, it's like that boy sticking his finger in the dam. The dam is all the unfunded liabilities. The dam is kind of what they're trying to do. The water it's pushing back is the unfunded liabilities. So what is someone to do with the kind of the financial storm we're in? Banking crisis of 2 months ago, it looks like, maybe another bank or two will fall, but it looks like that's sort of under control. But then we're heading straight into a recession. What are your thoughts on this recession and banking crisis of the last few months?
Yeah, I tend to not have a huge, a strong opinion on the types of things that one would invest in to sort of weather these types of storms. I'm more of someone who takes a stand on the types of accounts within which you should invest. I think that this regional bank crisis, I think that there's going to be some more fallout from that. I think that more banks are going to go bankrupt. I think that the big banks will get even bigger in the meantime. I think that money will continue to flock to the big banks because they had the much higher standards in terms of supervision. In terms of the recession, I don't have a real crystal ball here, and I tend to have a long-term perspective on these types of things. But my approach would be continue to invest in capital markets, but do so within the right types of accounts. What are the right types of accounts? I think for a broad swath of Americans, the right types of accounts are tax-free accounts like Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, Roth conversions, some types of cash value life insurance, taking money out of your IRAs up to your standard deduction, having that be completely offset so that's tax-free. And then if you can keep your provisional income low enough, then your Social Security is tax-free as well. So it's all about building a broad-based, comprehensive, balanced approach to weathering what I think is going to be the biggest storm that faces Americans over time, and that's dealing with a dramatically higher taxes down the road. I think that the market will ebb and flow based on lots of different factors between now and 2033. But I think that if we don't have our fiscal house in order by 2030 or 2033, somewhere in that time frame, I think that we're all going to be in for a rude awakening, particularly if we have the lion's share of our assets squirreled away in 401ks and IRAs.
And folks, if you like what you're hearing and you want to learn how to get tax-free income for life, get David McKnight's book, A Forward by Tom Hegna, industry legend of the financial industry, a step-by-step plan for a secure retirement. The book is called Tax-Free Income for Life. That'll be our free giveaway for those of you who schedule and keep your no obligation review at 888-988-JOSH. Or if you like more of a novella, this is Howard, who's a CFP in our office. His favorite book that you've ever written is The Volatility Shield. He says that does a really good job of communicating the topics that we as financial advisors try to bring up, but sometimes you just don't get it, or it's kind of boring. The Volatility Shield, Howard says, is your best book, bar none. So we could give that away as well, or The Power of Zero, the new update. Just call us, folks, 888-988-JOSH, 888-988-5674. We'll be back after these messages. And we're back. This is Josh Jelinski, the financial quarterback, with David McKnight. So I'm going to ask you this. I know your favorite book now is probably The Thrill or The Infinity Code. Of all your books, what's your favorite book? And then I want you to repeat what you said and unpack, because about a few minutes ago, you just gave people, I would say, the secret to financial success in like 2 or 3 minutes. So you probably practiced that. Or I've heard that from you before, but I want you to unpack it and repeat it, because you're not saying, I'm going to be able to prognosticate. What I like about you is you're not trying to predict the future. You're not trying to dissuade people from investing in the capital markets. You're telling people, hey, here's what is. Here's the where you should put your money, asset location, which I think a lot of these financial books are missing. So what's your favorite book that you've ever written? And then we'll get into your comments.
I don't know, Josh, that's like saying which of your kids is your favorite.
Yeah.
That's a tough
That's
one.
a bad
I would
question.
say that if you're looking for pure enjoyment level, the feedback that I've gotten the most is probably from The Infinity Code. That's a full-length novel that has financial themes. It's sort of, it's sort of a cross between a Dan Brown thriller with, some financial, with a financial book that has financial themes. That's my most recent book. But I hear a lot of people tell me, like what your CFP in your office said, that the volatility shield is their favorite. So people tend to like stories that have, cool twist endings and feel good endings as well. So those probably two of my favorite. The bestseller, of course, is The Power of Zero, far and away. I think that's the one that's the sort of the bedrock of the entire Power of Zero worldview. So I certainly can't slight that book because that's what put everything on the map.
And even Look Before You LIRP, I think, answers the very question of, you've heard a lot of insurance policies are poorly structured. What is a properly structured insurance policy? I think that's a great one. And, there's a debate. I know there's this one guy who's picking on you, and then you were fighting him on social media, and then he was fighting you. I think you made him bigger, though, by you fighting with him because you're bigger than he is. But, I think the debate, term, UL, whole life, IUL, it can sort of be dumb. The thing is, get protection, make sure your policy is properly constructed. And so I do like that book, Look Before You LIRP, because of some very intricate things. Do you want to comment on your recent, now recent, I think it was like last summer, you had a little TikTok war with somebody, or maybe it was when I was on vacation.
Are you talking about the I don't even want to mention his name, the guy on YouTube who every other video is anti-index universal life? Is that the guy?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote, I basically watched an interview that he did, and I've got a little antenna in my head that sort of detects truth. And there were 4 or 5 things he said during this interview that just didn't seem right. And so I just wanted to correct the record. And it turns out I stirred up a big hornet's nest, and he took it very personally, which I get. I basically called his baby ugly, and he basically did a lot of things. He did a lot of huffing and puffing and challenging to debates and things like that. But I've got a busy life, and so I just let the whole thing die down, which generally I find in life is the best thing to do. But yeah, he's a big whole life advocate. I'm a big index universal life advocate, and we both feel pretty secure in our beliefs. So I guess I just left it at that.
Now they say all controversy. It's like all media is good media. What did it pump your numbers on YouTube or TikTok or anything?
I don't. That video that I did of him was one of my best watched videos, probably because he had so many of his followers that actually watched it. So you took all of his followers, all of my followers, they both watched it.
So it helped you then. It helped you. His clout chasing helped you. I mean, the thing is of the debate, I mean, I'm a little bit more on the whole life side, on the permanent side. But when you come to insurance, people are so misleading, pro-term, pro-IUL, pro-whole life. If you just think of it properly constructed, no insurance company, A+ rated, IUL or whole, is going to structure a product where they lose money. So we all agree on that. The difference in whole life versus IUL, and you're probably a bigger expert than I am on this, it's options pricing, it's what are they making on their yield. So people who trash IUL or whole life to the neglect of a balanced conversation, it's just like it doesn't really do anything for me anymore. I'm so tired of misinformation. I've seen good IULs. I've seen bad IULs. I've seen good whole life. I've seen bad whole life. And there are variables in both. In a whole life policy, the company can change the dividends. The company could be bought, right? I mean, those are two, I would say, negatives of a whole life policy. the big negatives. The board of directors can change the dividends every year. IUL, they can lower the caps. I mean, they can raise the cost of insurance. I mean, an insurance policy needs to be managed, once a year, do an annual review, double check it. Any comments on that? Kind of the IUL whole life debate?
What I tell people generally is whatever road you take in life is fraught with peril. A whole life could be fraught with peril. I mean, it's supposed to be, chock full of guarantees, but the truth is, they could raise lower your dividend down to almost nothing, and you get nothing but the guarantees. IUL, like you said, they can lower the caps and raise insurance. Interest rates could fall so that the option budget is much smaller. So all of these things are sensitive to economic constraints. With your 401k, the stock market could get chopped in half because we're in a recession. Any number of things. We could have another pandemic. All of these roads we take in life are fraught with peril. And so we just have to balance all of these different financial instruments against each other so that we have the best possibility of achieving a positive outcome over time. And so I just tend to take that sort of perspective versus my counterpart on YouTube who says, IUL is of the devil, whole life is an exalted sort of a product. I just think that those types of approaches are stale and not very circumspect.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's good. What your new books is going to be about, challenging the gurus. So I can't wait that. But I really think there was a Tony Robbins documentary that said, we should do this documentary. It's my idea. I'm trademarking it right now. So if you do it, you got to do it with me. It should be called I Am Not Your Guru, or now we can't use that because Tony Robbins used it. But something like the answer is not David McKnight or the financial quarterback or Dave Ramsey or Josh, whatever, anybody. No, who cares? It is you're the answer, taking your own control of your financial destiny, learning about these products, learning about the tax code. Because there could be a point like somebody could say, okay, buy insurance because insurance is, if insurance is the way to save yourself from taxes, then somebody says, well, I don't want to do insurance because all these variables. Well, if you pick a good A+ rated company and they start raising the cost of insurance, you could bail on that company. You could do a 1035 exchange. And I don't care what company it is, they could fail you. You have to structure your life so that it's anti-fragile. And you can't just say, well, like you said, stocks could go down 50%. Well, it doesn't mean you don't invest in stocks. It means you have some insurance, you have some stocks, you have some ETFs. And I love that about your work. It's not like this either or, it's a both. And comment on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's best represented, like I said earlier. If you look at my approach to tax-free retirement, it's not having all of your eggs in one basket. I don't believe, for example, that like you see on TikTok these days, I'm sure this drives you crazy, Josh. You see on TikTok these, it's the wild, wild west out there, by the way. People that claim that, for example, IUL is the end-all, be-all of investments. So they'll denigrate 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, 457s, because they don't measure up to what the IUL offers. I think that's a sort of a foolhardy way to approach retirement. I believe that every stream of tax-free income out there has some quality, some attribute that makes it unique. And I'll give you an example. I typically recommend 6 different streams of tax-free income to my clients. What are they? Roth IRA, Roth 401k, Roth conversion, taking money out of your IRA up to your standard deduction, so that gets offset, so that's tax-free, LIRP, and tax-free Social Security if you can keep your provisional income low enough. All of those streams of tax-free income have something unique about them. For example, the Roth IRA you can touch whenever you want, at least the contributions you've made. None of those other streams of income allow you to do that. For a Roth 401k, it has a match. Roth conversion, you can do as much as you want. There's no limits on how much you convert in any given year. Tax-free distributions from your IRA, that's like the the holy grail of financial planning. You got a tax deduction on the way in. You grew tax deferred. You took it out tax free. The LIRP allows you to receive your death benefit in advance of your death for the purpose of paying for long-term care. None of the other streams of tax-free income do it. So, and then Social Security, the longer you have it, the better it is. It helps you mitigate against sequence return risk, inflation risk, long-term care risk. So all of these streams of tax-free income are part of the picture. If you fixate on just one or the other, you miss out on the benefits of all the rest. And so that's sort of that balanced, comprehensive approach that I love to take in my financial planning worldview.
Where can people find the 6 to 8 tax-free streams of income? Is that in tax-free income, or that's in power? It's in all of them a little bit, but
yeah, it's mixed all in there. They can see it. They can find that in tax-free income for life. They can find it in Power Zero.
I mean, people, there's been 2 points today where you've just dropped pure gold for free for our listeners. We're gonna unpack those 2 things when we return. But if you like what you're hearing and you want his book, Tax-Free Income for Life, do you prefer they go to davidmcknight.com to buy your book, or Amazon? Where do you prefer?
Amazon's the best place.
Okay. And also, folks, call us, 888-988-JOSH. We'll give it to you for free if you call us at 888-988-JOSH and schedule your no-obligation second opinion on your money. Protect your retirement savings from the impact of rising taxes. Up next, David McKnight just dropped 2 things that might take people 10 years in the financial industry to learn. He's given that to us in like 2 paragraphs. I'm going to break those down because, you know, if there was a cue card that I could give young financial advisors, it would be what you just said. When we return, this is Josh Jelinski, the financial quarterback, with David McKnight, author of Power of Zero. 888-988-JOSH, 888-988-JOSH. And we're back. This is Josh Jelinski, the financial quarterback, with David McKnight. We're on Spotify, YouTube, New York's biggest AM talker, WOR 710 AM. Subscribe wherever you can, iTunes. David, you dropped pure gold nuggets. I'll add 2 more. So you said there's 6 streams of tax-free income. I'm going to add 2 more, if it's all right with you. You said Roth 401k, which, by the way, that is a very underutilized thing, because a small business owner can do a solo Roth 401k without any income limitation. You want to talk about that? Because people don't realize that. Roth 401k is very underutilized.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the typical traditional Roth IRA, you know, you make north of $228,000 of modified adjusted gross income. You can no longer do a Roth IRA, and you're constrained, if you're over age 50, to $7,500 of contribution limits. You don't have those same types of income limitations with a Roth 401k. And the Roth 401k, you know, you can put in not just the 22.5, but you got the catch-up of $7,500. So you can put in a total of $30,000 per year in a Roth 401k. So the Roth 401k has a lot of advantages to it. And the great part about it all is you can do both. If you're under that $228,000 modified adjusted gross income limit, you can do the $7,500 for the Roth and the $30,000 for the Roth 401k. And if you're married, your spouse can do that as well. So that's $75,000 of total contributions to tax-free accounts. And if they give you, say, a $5,000 match each, that's another $10,000 that could go into the Roth portion of your 401k. So that's, you know, $85,000 per year you could squirrel away in a tax-free account. And that's before you ever even got to your LIRP.
Wait, how do you get to 85,000?
I assume that if you have a Roth 401k, maybe you get a dollar for dollar match up to 5% of your income. If you're making 100, your spouse is making 100, then that's an extra 10.
And the 37.5 times 2 is a great tip that I mean, I knew, but I didn't think of it like that until you just said it. Yeah, because you could, if you own a company and let's say your spouse works for you or with you, you pay them a salary. A lot of times people don't pay their spouses a salary. I would, so that they could get that 401k, that Roth 401k. But you might say, but my accountant said I got to pay the FICA tax. I got to pay the W-2. Yeah, but you could get $75,000 a year, for 37,500 times 2 for you and your spouse. That's $75,000 a year without earning any interest over 10 years. tax-free growth, even if you put it at a 4% money market account, people don't realize this, money markets at the bank are paying now 4 or 5%. That's all taxable. But then the Roth, it's tax-free. So, and that taxable money market, the reason why this is so important now, folks, is there's people I see all the time. They have $1 million of cash earning 5%. They have 500 grand of cash earning 0% or 4%. They should not just keep it at the bank because that will hurt them on Social Security taxation. They will hurt them on Medicare taxation. You alluded to this earlier, but break that down, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, goody, my banker is now giving me 4 or 5%. After the bank giving you nothing for 12 years, they're waking up, they're getting better interest rates, but they don't realize they're going to get screwed on taxes because that $1 million of cash or that $500,000 of cash at 4%, extra 20 grand a year, that's taxable income. What are some ways, first discuss the problem and then some solutions in that regard?
Yeah, so people got to remember this is all short-term capital gains, which means it gets paid at ordinary income tax rates, which means it gets piled on top of all your other income and tax on the margin. So if your highest marginal tax bracket is 32%, throw in another 8% for state tax. So now you're paying 40% tax on that 4% growth. So now you're, you only made 60% of that growth. So 60% of 4 is 2.4. So now you're barely keeping up with inflation, right? And all of that income now gets counted as provisional income. So if you're in retirement and you're taking Social Security, it increases the likelihood that you're going to have to pay tax on your Social Security. Okay. And remember, if you have to pay tax on your Social Security, you got a hole in your Social Security because of taxation. How do most Americans go about plugging that hole in their Social Security? Well, they got to spend their 401ks and IRAs down to compensate. And that's could cause you to run out of money quite a bit faster than you thought possible. All because we're growing dollars in a place where really the tax is optional. I tell people all the time, if you're paying a tax in your taxable bucket, that's an optional tax. So why not? There's a lot of different ways, Josh, frankly, to get money out of your taxable bucket and into a tax-free bucket. You can contribute it to a Roth IRA if you're still working. You can take more money out of your paycheck and contribute that to your Roth 401k, fully fund your Roth 401k if you're not already doing it. You will now have a hole in your paycheck because you've taken money that you would have otherwise spent and you put in your Roth 401k. Well, compensate out of your taxable bucket. Spend the money out of your taxable bucket to compensate. You could do a Roth conversion. So you can then take money out of your taxable bucket to pay the tax on that Roth conversion. You can take money out of your taxable bucket to fund an LIRP so that you have long-term care. And if you die peaceful in your sleep, never having needed that long-term care, your children or grandchildren are still getting a death benefit. So there's all sorts of different ways to get money out of that taxable bucket if you have too much in there. But suffice it to say, if you're paying a tax of that taxable bucket, it's an optional tax. You don't have to pay it. You're choosing to pay that tax.
Fantastic. And there are basically asset relocation strategies, whether it's Roths, whether it's the LIRPs. Fantastic. David McKnight, author of the book, Power of Zero, free giveaway, 888-988-JOSH. Call us now, 888-988-JOSH. We'll give you one of his 3 books, Tax-Free Income for Life, great book. Also, Look Before You LIRP, or The Volatility Shield, or Power of Zero. You get to pick one. Or just go on Amazon, search for David McKnight, great author, one of the best financial authors of the last 25 years. Put him up there with anybody. And his books are good, and they show you how to get in the zero bracket. A lot of people think, well, David, I make too much money to do these strategies. This sounds great, but how do I really get in the zero bracket if I'm, if I get $1 million in cash or $1 million in an IRA, how do I get to zero? And you break it down in Power of Zero. They actually can, but a lot of people don't realize that they can.
Yeah, I actually have a lot of people come up to me and they say, "Oh, Dave, I got $1 million in my IRA, so I'll never get to zero, right? I'll never be able to pull this off." And I say, you got to read the chapter. I think it's chapter 6 of the updated revised version of the Power of Zero. It's called "The Tax Sale of a Lifetime." There is a sweet spot in the Trump tax cuts that people often overlook. It's my very favorite tax bracket. It's a 24% tax bracket. if you're in the 22% tax bracket, Josh, you know, let me back up and say, if you're in the 12% tax bracket, and I warn you that tax rates could potentially double in the next 10 years, and you say, okay, but you want me to bump up into the 22% tax bracket to protect myself from that? What have I basically told you? I basically told you I'm going to double your tax bracket in the short term to avoid a doubling of tax rates for you over time. That's not something that most people really get warm and fuzzy about. However, if you're already in the 22% tax bracket, why not convert your IRA to a Roth up to the top of the 22% tax bracket? By the way, the 24% tax bracket is only 2% higher, but it allows you to convert an extra $170,000 per year. So between the 22 and the 24% tax bracket, you could convert $250,000 per year and still be at a tax bracket that's lower than the future version of the 22% tax bracket, which is the 25% tax bracket. So we have this window of opportunity during which to take advantage of historically low tax rates. I do personally believe, Josh, that they're going to extend the 22 and 24% tax brackets for the middle class. And I think they're going to do it before 2024, certainly before 2026. I think that politicians that don't do that will be perceived as having raised taxes on the middle class. That's not something they want to be perceived as having done. And so I think that that's going to happen, which means get $1 million in your IRA, you could potentially have 8 or 9 years during which to take advantage of the 24% tax bracket, which would allow you to convert 24% or $250,000 per year and still stay in this insanely low tax bracket relative to what we've seen in history. So there is all sorts of opportunity to get to tax-free, and every year that goes by where people fail to take advantage of these historically low tax rates is potentially a year beyond 2030 when they could be forced to pay double the rates.
No, that's fantastic. And folks, get the book Power of Zero. You can learn all about this. Newly revised and updated. Call us at 888-988-JOSH, or you can get it for free if you call us at 888-988-JOSH, or buy it wherever books are sold, Amazon, whatever. So, David, this is good stuff. So let's break down the tax-free stuff some more. You said this golden phrase, 6 ways people can get tax-free income streams. You have number 1, Roth 401ks. Number 2, Roth IRAs. Number 3, Roth conversions. Number 4, LIRPs, life insurance retirement plans, which is really good if you have people who can't do a Roth and people who are in the 37% tax bracket, or even more so or people who want long-term care. We'll talk about that. There's many different reasons why that's powerful. Fifth is IRA distributions up to the standard deduction, which is very underlooked, and you talk about it in Power Zero. Because sometimes in this internet soundbite community, meet life insurance friendly advisors who say, get all your money out of the 401k, get all your money out of the IRA. And you're not doing it wisely. You got to, do it up to the standard deduction. And then what was 6th? And then
Sixth was Social Security.
Social
So
Security.
long as you stay below your provisional income thresholds.
And that's huge. And I would kind of link with that Medicare taxation, because if you have everything tax-free, you're going to have lower Medicare taxes when you're 75. IRMA, the dreaded IRMA. You want to talk about that? IRMA planning's big right now.
Yeah. So this is one of the number one complaints that people have about Roth conversions, as they say, hey, Dave, if I do a Roth conversion over the next 5 years, my IRMA payments are going to go through the roof. They're going to get really expensive. And is it really worth it? We actually have a calculator where we actually show them the IRMA they would pay if they just left the money in the IRA, and how those increased IRMA payments, they just get bigger as the RMDs get bigger and bigger and bigger. They just get bigger and bigger and bigger over time. And then we add up cumulatively how much increased IRMA premium they would have to pay over their lifetime versus having to pay just the increased amount over the 5 years and then just the normal premium from that point forward. And you know what? It's not even close. And then if you add in the Social Security taxation that you have to pay by having to, take those RMDs over time, and you add that to the increased IRMA payments, it's not even close. And so it's sort of like Ed Slott says, you got to rip the Band-Aid off. And if you rip the Band-Aid off, then you'll be all the better for it.
So as it relates to IRMA, which is the income-related Medicare adjustment, your ugly Aunt Irma that you don't want to come visit you, for some reason, the time that people should do this LIRP planning and IRMA planning is in their 50s. And then they kind of wake up and they realize they should do it when they're 65. Why is it so important for people to wake up? If you're 50 and over listening, why should people do this planning at 50 instead of just 65? Now, if you're 65 or 70, it's not too late. You should still do it. But talk about sort of the age people, because when sometimes people hear this, they say, oh, I'm too old. And then other people say, I'm too young. Kind of break down, what should a person in their 40s do, 50s, 60s, 70s? Like a life cycle approach.
So are you talking about like the timing of Roth conversions?
Yeah, like what I've found is in applying your work, Ed Slott work, other researchers kind of saying the same thing. Sweet spot's like 50 to 65 because you don't have the IRMA even to deal with. So it's better to do the Roth conversions when you're still working and you're in your 50s, early 60s, and when you wake up, unless you're in a really high tax bracket from 50 to 65 and you retire at 65 and you're going to be, let's say you have a lot of passive income, stuff like that.
Yeah, I think if you're still working, obviously you haven't taken, you're not taking Medicare yet, and you're in the 22% tax bracket. A lot of Americans that come to our workshops and come into my office, they're in the 22% tax bracket. They've done a really good job saving. They've saved 10 to 20% of their income over a long period of time. So they got $1 million or $2 million in their 401ks, but they're in that they're middle-class Americans. They're in that 22% tax bracket. For those people, it makes a ton of sense to convert to the top of the 22, and then for 2% more, convert to the top of the 24. That makes a lot of sense because you get all the heavy lifting done, number one, before tax rates go up for good, but number two, before you have to start dealing with IRMA. The flip side is if you wait until you're 65 to do your Roth conversion, you could be in a lower tax bracket, potentially. But you have to weigh that against the potential of paying higher tax on your IRMA and paying higher tax on your Social Security while you get that money transitioned to tax-free. So I would say that if you're currently working and you're in the 22 or even 24% tax bracket, it makes sense to start executing that Roth conversion while tax rates are low and while you're in that low tax bracket.
What about people in their 70s or 80s? They say, I'm too old for this. It's funny, we had Ed Slott on, and we had a listener. We either you or Ed Slott on, and we had a listener who was in her 80s and 90s, and Ed was like, don't worry about it. Spend your money. You're going to... But he didn't realize these were my listeners. These are New York, New Jersey. People listen to WR. They're frugal. They're clipping coupons, even though they have $2 million. What he should have said, and I corrected Ed because he didn't know my audience as well, even though I think we both got our start on the same basic station, WOR. My theory was, I want you can disagree with me, it's okay. But my theory was if you have an 80-year-old and you're not spending, and you haven't spent it by now, you're probably not going to spend it. So it would be far better to do the conversions, the Roth conversions from 80 to 90, even though they've changed the law with the Secure Act. Because Ed was kind of like, the Secure Act, now they got to spend it. And you know how he is. He's like, it doesn't matter. Just spend your money. You're 80. Enjoy yourself. Eat the birthday cake. Go for ice cream. But he doesn't get it. They're not doing it. So my point was, because I know our listeners a little better, from 80 to 90, do those conversions. And because they're at a lower bracket, maybe they're at 12 or 22 or 24, their kids are in a 37% bracket because their kids are very successful. And your kids could have 10 years of tax-free compounding with the Roth or with a LIRP. You could buy a LIRP on your kids and they could have 80 years of tax-free compounding.
Yeah, there's two considerations, I think. One is this is what I call the quadrupling of tax rates, Josh. If you're married in your 80s, there's a good chance your spouse is going to die pretty soon. That's just the actuarial tables.
70s,
right?
to be honest, people are dying at 77, 78. Yeah.
Yeah. So your spouse is going to die, and what happens to your tax bracket? It contracts by half. So all of a sudden you're spending the same amount of money, but you're paying twice as much in tax. So that's an issue. The second issue is that we're still, if you're going to be alive for 10 years, you're still under the gun when it comes to increasing tax rates. You could still potentially be exposed to higher taxes down the road. David Walker, former Comptroller General of the federal government, predicted in his book, Come Back America, that tax rates would have to increase to a 45% effective level across the board by 2030 to keep our country solvent. So if that happens, then you're going to be able to spend as much, much less of that required minimum distribution as you thought possible. So not only did your tax bracket double, but taxes themselves doubled. So there's your quadrupling in tax rates. And then if you don't, like you mentioned, Josh, if you don't pay the tax today at these historically low tax rates, then your kids are going to inherit these IRAs and be forced to spend it down on top of all their other income at their highest marginal tax rates at the apex of their earning years, when they can least afford to pay the tax, when tax rates are likely to be much higher than they are today, when they've got fewer deductions to be able to pull it off. So generally speaking, doing the Roth conversion for people in that situation almost always makes sense.
Fantastic. Yeah. So we stumped the legend, Ed Slott. We didn't stump him. I think he was just on a path of where he says, spend your money. You're a certain age. God bless you. He was sweet. He felt bad for this listener who just was, saving their pennies. But what I found, if a client's not spending their money by like 80, 85, they're not spending much of it. They might take a little bit here or there. But I think you also have to incorporate, realism. The other two things I thought about that you made me think about were HSAs. Right. It's another triple tax-free vehicle. And now, although I was never a big fan of the 529, I'm sure I just think it's a very limiting financial product. Now with some of the new rules of the Revised Secure Act 2.0 and the kind of the fix, I think you could leave up to 35 grand in a 529 now, and then the heir can convert that to a Roth. So that would be like the 8th tax-free vehicle to kind of incorporate to your work. Any comments on that?
Yeah, I would say the one I hear about most often when I list those 6, the one that people bring up the most is the HSA. And the HSA is also like the holy grail of financial planning, because you get that tax deduction when you put the money in, it grows tax deferred, you take it out tax-free. So in that regard, the HSA is just like your tax-free RMD when you offset it by the standard deduction. So obviously the only constraint with the HSA is you've got to use it for a qualified healthcare expense, but we all have qualified healthcare expenses, and you're going to have to spend that money at some point in your life. So why not spend it in a tax-free way? So certainly the HSA, the only reason I don't typically talk about it is because it does have a few strings attached, and not everybody has access to it, but it certainly does qualify.
And as we conclude, you dropped this pure gold phrase when you said the where you put your money is more important. Can you repeat that phrase slowly?
Boy, let's see. What did I say?
It was pure
It's not
gold.
so much the investment as the type of account within which it's being invested, something like that.
Yeah, and then you also said there are like 6 things you should do. It might have been the same thing you just said, but I don't know. There was I got
it's 6 different streams of tax-free income, none of which show up on the IRS's radar, but all of which contribute to you being in the 0% tax bracket.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And well, I want to thank you for joining us. As always, David McKnight, you can get his work on Amazon. Go to davidmcknight.com. We have a lot of advisors who listen to the show. If you're interested and you want to learn more about what he does for advisors, davidmcknight.com. And folks, if you want the book for free, we'll give it to you if you call us right now at 888-988-JOSH. And parting thoughts for our listeners. Anything you want to talk about that you didn't?
No, don't let a year go by where you're not taking advantage of historically low tax rates, because once that window shuts, it's going to shut for good. And we're going to look back 10 years from now, we'll look back on 2023 and say, why did we not take advantage of those historically low tax rates while we could?
The other thing that you made me think of, just pop in my mind, kind of conclude, you've been mentioning long-term care riders as a big thing and the ability to protect long-term care. I would say the last 3 years, there's been an innovation I'm seeing of single people interested in the LIRP for the long-term care privileges, but because they saw so many seniors die in nursing homes in COVID, or the reports, or maybe they know somebody, and they don't want to have, they don't want to be relegated to a state-run facility. So I've seen growing interest in the LIRP from single people with no kids. Have you seen that too?
It's certainly, yeah. I mean, because the alternative is if you don't have any sort of a care, you do get relegated to a Medicaid funded, long-term care facility. And frankly, as you know, Josh, the level of care in a Medicaid funded long-term care facility is not anywhere close to the care you're going to get in a privately, funded long-term care facility. And the LIRP, in as much as it allows you to spend your death benefit in advance of your death for the purpose of paying for long-term care, serves as a great way to fund that expense.
And what I've even done with my trusts and things that kind of my end of life planning is I set up, my kids have to use my LIRP to pay for me to be in my house and be taken care of 24/7 by nurses in my house, get a separate entrance. So you can be so if you don't want to go facility, you can have your LIRP. It's also freedom from a nursing home if you don't want to do that too. So that's a good point. Well, thank you so much, David McKnight, author of The Power of Zero. Folks, you can get it by calling us at 888-988-JOSH or going to Amazon. Thanks again so much for joining us, David.
Thanks for having me.
Take care. Nice, man.